fragile defense line shielding eastern Ukraine suffered a catastrophic rupture overnight as Russian forces achieved a decisive breakthrough west of Avdiivka, shattering Ukrainian positions across the Pokrovsk axis and sending shockwaves through Kyiv and western capitals. This collapse, long feared by military analysts but occurring with startling rapidity, represents the most significant Russian territorial gain since the early months of the invasion and threatens to unravel Ukraine's entire defensive posture in the Donbas region. Relentless Russian pressure, exploiting severe Ukrainian shortage in artillery shells, manpower, and air defense, finally overwhelmed exhausted brigades holding ground that had been bitterly contested for months. Ukrainian commanders on the ground reported near total disintegration of organized resistance across multiple sectors by dawn, with only isolated units conducting desperate fighting withdrawals under constant aerial bombardment and advancing Russian armored columns. The focal points of the collapse centered on the strategic town of Kharkivka, roughly 25 kilometers west of the ruined city of Avdiivka. Kharkivka, situated on high ground overlooking key road and rail junctions leading toward Pokrovsk and Krakow, had been a linchpin in the Ukrainian defense build. For weeks, Ukrainian forces had repelled repeated assault, turning the approach into a charnel house for Russian infantry and armor. However, the sheer weight of Russian attack, employing dense mid-wave infantry assault, preceded by intense glide bomb strikes and artillery barrage, gradually wore down the defenders. Ukrainian troops, chronically undersupplied and operating with dwindling ammunition reserves, found their defensive fires weakening critically. A concentrated Russian thrust, spearheaded by elements of the 90th Tank Division and supported by overwhelming artillery and Lancet drone strikes targeting Ukrainian command posts and mortar positions, finally pierced the Ukrainian lines north of Kharkivka late yesterday evening. Exploiting this breach, Russian motorized rifle units flooded through, bypassing strong points and rapidly advancing southwest. Simultaneously, intense pressure south of Avdiivka near Nevelsky and further north around the village of Novokalinov succeeded in fixing Ukrainian reserves, preventing their timely redeployment to shore up the Kharkivka sector. As Russian forces surged through the Kharkivka gap, they quickly fanned out, threatening the flanks and rear of Ukrainian units still holding position east of the breakthrough. Encircled and facing annihilation, orders for a general retreat were issued, but the speed of the Russian advance turned the withdrawal into a chaotic rout. Verified geolocated footage flooding social media platforms shows Russian tanks and infantry fighting vehicles advancing virtually unopposed along the H-20 highway, the main supply route toward Pokrovsk, littered with abandoned Ukrainian vehicle and equipment. Columns of smoke rose from multiple points as Ukrainian forces destroyed ammunition dumps and bridges in a frantic effort to slow the Russian momentum. But these actions appear largely ineffectual against the tide of the advance. The immediate consequences is the loss of significant territory. Russian military bloggers and state media claim advances of up to 15 kilometers in depth along a front stretching over 20 kilometers wide, capturing or encircling settlements including Kharkivka itself, Prorz, Yasnoborodivka, and Vodyan. Crucially, Russian forces now threaten the logistical hub of Pokrovsk, a city roughly 45 kilometers west of Avdiivka that has served as a critical command center and supply node for Ukrainian forces across the entire Donbas front. Pokrovsk is now within range of Russian tube artillery, and Ukrainian officials confirm intense shelling has already struck the city's outskirts, railway station, and residential area, causing civilian casualties and widespread panic. The vital T-0504 highway running north-south through Pokrovsk is now under direct threat, potentially severing Ukrainian ground lines of communication between forces north around Chechivzyar and those south near Voldar. The strategic implications are dire. The collapse of the Pokrovsk axis effectively outflanks Ukrainian defensive positions further north around the unbattled towns of Chechivzyar, Ukraine troops in Chechnya are already under immense pressure and fighting in increasingly urbanized terrain now face the prospect of being enveloped from the south as Russian forces push northwest from the Prokrovsk direction. Military analysts fear Chechnya could fall within weeks, if not days, opening the path for Russia towards the larger city of Kostiantynivka, Kramatorsk, and Slovyansk, the administrative heart of Ukrainian-controlled Donetsk Oblast. Loss of these regions would represent a devastating political and military blow to Ukraine, effectively ceding the entire Donbas industrial basin to Russia and bringing Moscow's force within striking distance of the Dnipro River. Furthermore, the breakthrough exposed Ukrainian forces holding the line further south near Marinka and Volhyda to potential envelopment, forcing Kyiv to consider a large-scale, disorderly retreat across the entire southern Donetsk front. To avoid catastrophic loss, reaction from Kyiv was swift and grim. President Zelensky, addressing the nation in a pre-dawn broadcast visibly strained, acknowledged the extremely difficult situation on the Prokrovsk front, calling it a moment of maximum danger. He placed direct blame on the criminal delay in Western military aid, particularly the stalled $61 billion U.S. assistance package held up in Congress a month earlier in the year, which only began trickling through in limited quantities too late to prevent the ammunition crisis crippling frontline units. Our warriors fought heroically, but without shells, without sufficient air defense against guided bombs, without timely replacements for our wounded and fallen. Even the bravest cannot hold forever, Zelensky stated, his voice heavy with emotion. He urgently appealed to allies for immediate shipments of artillery ammunition, long-range missiles capable of striking Russian logistic hubs like Donetsk City and Taganrog, and critically more advanced air defense systems, specifically naming the Patriot missile batteries desperately needed to counter the Russian glide bombs that devastates positions around Kharkivka. Every hour of delay now costs Ukrainian lives and kilometers of our land, he warned. Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov confirmed the severity of the losses, stating that several brigades suffered significant degradation during the withdrawal and that stabilizing a new defensive lines was the absolute priority. He announced the immediate redeployment of strategic reserve, including elements of the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade and the 47th Mechanized Brigade, previously held back for counteroffensive operation, to plug the gap and prevent a complete operational collapse toward Prokrovsk and Kurakovsk. However, questions remain about the combat readiness of these reserves after months of intense frontline rotations and whether they possess sufficient firepower to halt the surging Russian force. Commander-in-Chief of Alexander Thursky, visiting command posts near Krakow, emphasized the need to fortify positions around Prokrovsk, Krakow, and further west toward the Volhyda River. He considered that holding the current line was likely impossible and that a phased withdrawal to more defensible terrain might be necessary, a tacit admission of a significant territorial loss. In Moscow, the mood was triumphalist. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov declared the breakthrough a major victory, proving the inevitability of Russia achieving its state objectives. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu reported directly to President Vladimir Putin, claiming the liberation of over 250 square kilometers in the past 48 hours and the destruction of multiple Ukrainian brigades. State televisions broadcast footage of Russian troops raising flag over administrative buildings in captured village and columns of captured Ukrainian equipment. Russian military bloggers, often a more reliable source than official statements, celebrated the advance but cautioned that exploiting the breakthrough fully required rapidly bringing up reserves and supplies to sustain the momentum before Ukrainian reinforcement could establish a coherent new line. They identified the capture of Prokrovsk and the severing of the T-0504 highway as the immediate operational goals. The international response reflected the gravity of the situation. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg convened an immersive virtual meeting of the North Atlantic Council. While issuing a statement reaffirming unwavering support for Ukraine, alliance members were reportedly deeply divided behind closed doors. The Eastern European nations, particularly Poland and the Baltic states, demanded immediate massive increases in military aid, including the transfer of fighter jets and the lifting of restrictions on using Western supply weapons to strike targets deep inside Russia. Germany and France expressed grave concern but emphasized the need for calibrated support to avoid direct escalation with Moscow. The United Kingdom announced an emergency airlift of additional Brimstone's missiles and artillery shells, while Canada expedited deliveries of armored vehicles. The reaction from Washington was notably measured. Secretary of State Marco Rubio issued a brief statement expressing deep concern over the development and reaffirming the U.S. commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty. He stated that the administration was urgently reviewing further assistance package but provide no specific or timelines. Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth was reported to be in consultation with Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff General Charles Q. Brown Jr. and European Command. However, no immediate announcement of major new weaponry transfers emerged. This cautious stance fueled anxieties in Kyiv and European capitals that the new administration under President Trump, while rhetorically supportive, might be hesitant to commit the scale of resources needed to reverse the tide, potentially prioritizing other global flashpoints or seeking a negotiated outcome. Reports suggest intense lobbying efforts by Ukrainian officials with key figures in Congress known to be supportive, but the political climate in Washington remains complex and unpredictable. The human cost of the collapse is already immense and mounting. Eyewitnesses' accounts and limited reports from humanitarian workers attempting to reach the area describe scenes of chaos on the roads leading west from Pokrovsk. Thousands of civilians are fleeing panic, creating massive traffic jams vulnerable to Russian artillery and drone strikes. Emergency services in Pokrovsk are overwhelmed, struggling to evacuate wounded soldiers and civilians amidst the bombardment. Hospitals in Kramatorsk and Dnipro reported receiving hundreds of casualties overnight, many suffering severe shrapnel and burn wounds consistent with glide bomb and cluster munition strikes. The fate of Ukrainian soldiers cut off during the retreat remained unknown, with fears of heavy losses in prisoners of war. The Russian advance also brings renewed concern about potential atrocity against civilians in newly occupied territories, recalling the grim discoveries in Bucha and Izium. The collapse of the Pokrovsk front is more than a tactical defeat. It is a potential strategic inflection point in the conflict. It demonstrates the devastating effectiveness of Russia's strategy of attrition, grinding down Ukrainian forces through sheer mass and firepower superiority, exploiting critical Western delays in aid provision. It exposed the vulnerability of Ukrainian defensive lines, stretched thin after years of brutal combat. The immediate future hinges on Ukraine's ability to rapidly establish a stable new defensive line west of Pokrovsk. The speed and scale of Western military aid deliveries, particularly ammunition and air defense, and Russia's capacity to exploit its breakthrough before logistical strain sets in. Failure to stabilize the front risks a cascading collapse across Donbas Oblast, bringing Russian forces closer than ever to achieving their goal of controlling the entire region and fundamentally altering the geopolitical map of Europe. The coming days will be decisive not just for the fate of Pokrovsk, but for the trajectory of the entire war. The catastrophe on the Pokrovsk axis has plunged Ukraine into its darkest hour since the initial invasion, demanding extraordinary resilience from its people and unequivocal immediate action from its allies. The window to prevent a total operational disaster in the Donbas is rapidly closing. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, and so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to World Global Conflict, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first one's on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build this show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.